Alright, hello everybody. Today we're going to be talking about a significant severe weather outbreak sequence that is likely across portions of the central US and into maybe even the Mississippi River Valley over the next few days. We'll just first kind of go through what the W Weather Prediction Center thinks for the fronts wise. I'll just quickly go through. You can pause it if you want to. But here's what they're thinking. So that's what they're thinking. Let's go to the Storm Prediction Center. So day one outlook today, we have 5 wind, 5 hail, nothing really significant. Tomorrow, which we will talk about, there is an under 2% chance of tornadoes. I do think the tornado chance is 2% in my opinion, and there's a 15 wind and a 15 hail and a 5 wind. Day 3, we could be looking at a significant event. Currently, it's non-sig, but I do expect at some point we'll get a significant risk for hail and damaging wind gusts. A couple tornadoes to a few tornadoes would also be possible. Day 4, potential is too low, but we'll probably see a marginal to slight with it on the day 3. We have a day 5, 15%, and then we'll likely see a day 5, we'll likely see day 6 get a risk at some point in the near future as well. Now, let's go over this closer range event with the HRRR, and then we'll end the wrap in a second here. We're going to look at this closer ranged event because this is closer. We're going to take time to focus on it. It's something to monitor, nothing to sneeze by or anything. But tonight, maybe some isolated strong storms in Minnesota. Nothing too significant though. And then tomorrow, we're likely going to see some morning convection across this area, but then we start to see some stronger storms fire, and we see a couple supercells that the HRRR hints at firing. And the environment is there for tornadoes. It's got a low instability, but very high sheared environment. Not very high, but highly enough. And I do think there's potential for a tornado or two with this. Then we see some large to very large hail chances as well. Still pretty good soundings here. Moving along, we see this grows upscale. And we do still see some strong storms in the morning hours. When there is another marginal risk of severe weather across the northern Midwest the next day, which we'll look at on the 3-kilometer model. So here's what the NAM 3-kilometer has to say. And then for the next day, it also shows the potential for isolated severe weather as well. Let me come over to the upper Midwest for this. Looks like more of a late evening event, maybe. And you know what? There could be a tornado or two with this, easily. So we're going to have to watch this for a brief tornado, isolated damaging wind gusts, and isolated large hail. And now we're going to look at the event on the WRAP model, and then we'll go look at the event on the NAM 3-kilometer for day 3. We'll also look at the NAM as well. Let's go to the 15Z run. Let's take a sounding like right here. And yeah, College of DuPage did get a big update that involves like a bit changes to the model area with the website. So let's analyze this sounding that we get here. So this sounding is the reason why they probably have not this sounding alone, but this is one of the reasons why they probably have withheld going to tour. The hodograph is there in the wind shear, but it's riding the line of being elevated, if not elevated, meaning that wind and hail would be the main threats. And the dew points are also just a little bit lower. Now, I'm going to go look at this. This is not really better. Let's go look at Minnesota too. So as we wait for that sounding to load here, let's wait for the sounding to load. And it is now loaded, so let's check it out. So Overall, the sounding looks pretty decent. There's a pretty strong surface cap to it, but overall, it's pretty decent. Definitely have that surface cap and riding the line of being elevated to worry about. But as I was just saying, this is a very good wind profile and good instability as well. Or not good. Good lapse race, I should say. Thermodynamics overall are not particularly impressive. So let's hop over to the NAM 3 kilometer and let's go look at Friday afternoon. So the NAM 3 kilometer wants a triple point event in portions of Oklahoma and Texas. We have enough moisture and we have that low with backed winds, which would create a supercell risk kind of right in here. Actually, probably would create a supercell risk in here. And these will probably be there'll probably be a few supercells that track near the low, but end up growing upscale eventually into more of a linear segment. Here's one of the soundings. Now, we do have a mid-level we have a very strong mid-level cap here, but I don't think it's going to be that strong. But we do see overall this is a decent sounding, minus that mid-level cap. Let's go look closer to the low there. Okay, here's a really nice sounding. Very good wind profile. Storm motion would be northeast and at a pretty fast clip too. Here's your storm motion vector. It'd be probably around 45 knots. So it'd be a 45 knot storm motion. So that's around 55, 50 mile per hour. So that's very fast storms. Very good shear. 84 knot deep layer. So really good overall. Good thermos too. So let's go look over like every single component. So at 0Z we have a cranking low level. We haven't had that cranking low level jet yet, but it's starting to kick up around that low. And we will see a cranking low level jet as we get into the night, which is shown by the NAM. We have a very strong jet streak across the area. So synoptically it's looking good. Our 0 to 6 kilometer wind shear also is 80 plus knots. Our lapse rates, they're favorable. Let's look at our surface space cape crossovers. Let's just check all of them off that are favorable and across the risk area. This one. This one. This one. So pretty much all of them within like this area are favorable. Now, this isn't exactly the risk area, but it's something to watch, and a lot of instability is in play. 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative velocity. At this point, it's highest in here, but the area that would have storms, it's highest around that low pressure region, which doesn't surprise me. Looking at the mixed layer cape, it's highest southern Texas, but there's some 2,000 spots in like Oklahoma. Now, let's go look over at the NAM. The NAM has something extremely similar. Let's take a sounding right at that low pressure area. Again, very similar to the NAM nest. This is going to be a very large hail day for sure, and it's going to be a day to watch for tornadoes as well. But it looks like very large hail and damaging wind gusts are going to be the main hazard. Significant as well. Very strong lapse rates too. If we take a sounding like right here, you're just going to see it has hail written like all over it, except that mid-level warm nose, which could be solved later on. And it is, because if we look later on here, that low pressure goes up to the Oklahoma City metro area, and let's just say pretty good photographs there. Still some extremely good deep layer shear. I mean, really good. And the only problem is like the capping, but at this point you'd have sufficient storms that have already went up that it's fine. And there's your low. You have a line of trailing storms across it with the low pivoting east-northeastward. Let's take a look at those storm motion vectors too. We'll take a sounding like right here and look at the vectors off the NAM. That is contaminated, so we're gonna have to pick somewhere else, but that would be a 60 mile per hour storm motion, very fast. Let's pick a little bit further to the northeast. So this is not as contam, and this is nearing 60 mile per hour storm motions, 50 knots or so. We have a very long photograph, longer track looking photograph than what we had before. So we could see an isolated strong long track tornado as well. We'll have to watch for that. And we'll probably see long track circulations embedded within the QLCS after all this goes upscale. But a decent sounding overall here. So we move on further with the night. The low pressure starts to deepen, and we start to get a more consolidated QLCS. Now, at this point, veer starts to become somewhat of an issue. And your storm motions are now close to 70 mile per hour, or now at 60 knots. So that's pretty impressive. So this is going to be a very fast-moving line of storms. We also have an area of storms developing further southward, right here. Bam. And this would be a tornado threat, and hail threat, and wind threat, all hazards. The storm motions down here are a lot slower than they are up there. They're around 30 to 40 knots down here, looking at the hodograph. And they're more oriented in a way that the boundary might not catch up to them as quickly. So, with that storm motion, we could see some more discrete thunderstorms further south. Later into the night. Now, of course, they will eventually grow upscale. There's no way that doesn't happen. And again, later, as we go later into the night, we still have those really good hodographs, and then we get to 12Z. Now, let's go up into the Midwest, because there's going to be potential for a severe weather event on Monday. So we have a couple leading bands of storms. Some of these could wipe off the risk a little bit. But there's a risk in Missouri here. Not bad. It's like a cold core-ish setup. But in like October, so it's not really that cold core. This is before like the line comes through, so in Illinois the wind profiles are all messed up. Maybe southern Illinois, they're not that bad. They're aight. But looking at the 850 millibar wind shear, it gets really strong. It gets 50 plus knots widespread, along with a jet streak of 70, 80 knots, so that's really significant. And we have dews in the 60s. Looking over at the St. Louis area, we have a very good sounding here with curvature. And the storm motions, again, are going to be extremely fast, like 50, 60 knots, which is going to equivalent, again, to 60 to 70 mile per hour. We have very strong shear still. We have strong storm relative velocity values there. We have good enough lapse rates to get the job done. Good lower level instability and overall marginal thermodynamic profiles. Let's look at the 0 to 1 kilometer SRH, as it's pretty high across south central Illinois. If I take a sounding in like the max, you get something pretty interesting like that, but that's called cherry picking. Now let's take a huge box sounding here across this area, and very good. I definitely say marginal to slight worthy. Skinny instability profiles, but a lot of shear, and the mean storm motion is at 70 mile per hour. So these storms are going to be, this line is going to be racing, and we can't discount the fact that there's going to be potential for severe weather further south in the Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee as well. But here's around 0Z. See, the hodographs are still pretty large. And again, storm motions are still going to be very fast. Now, let's move on to day 5. Day 5 is going to be probably a pretty significant tornado event across the plains. So let's first start off with our moisture advection. And let's first start off to see if the moisture advection is there, which it very well is there. We have southeasterly winds from the Gulf that bring up a huge plume of moisture, 50 dew points all the way into Nebraska. And the low pressure is going to be in the 990s to 980s. We could be talking about a major winter storm on the back end and potentially a blizzard. Now, I'm not one of those people to talk about winter storms or anything, so it won't be on my channel. But like people like Adrian's Weather Forecast are probably going to be talking about it. Maybe a few other bigger YouTubers would too. But we have that strong moisture advection here, giving off a pretty interesting risk. And now the GFS is the model that's the most furthest to the east. Most of the other ones are further west. Let's take a sounding though, right there, and watch. Very good sounding. We'll zoom in more. We'll first focus on synoptics too. Very strong trough moving across this area, giving off a very strong wind sheared area. And again, some strong lower level jet energy as well. Let's zoom in here. Now, strong low level jet for sure. We have good instability as well across this area. Now let's take a box sounding to see what we have. And holy cow, this is a really good box sounding. So you have some strong storm relative felicity upwards of 300, 50 knots of deep layer shear, 27 knots of low level shear. You have lapse rates of 6.5 to 7. You have 3 cape of 50, which in an average area that's really good. D cape of 1,200. Capping is enough to sustain discrete supercells. Mixler cape of 2,000. And dew point depression isn't that bad. Looking really good overall. And here's the area I took it. Kind of eastern Texas Panhandle, northern Texas, a lot of Oklahoma, and a lot of Kansas as well. Now let's take an individual sounding kind of right here. And it's pretty overpowered. It's not, the lower levels are a bit too dry with that sounding. I'll take one a little bit further east, and it's a bit better. It's not really that much better. We take one right here, though, it's probably going to be, yeah, this sounding is really good, a lot better than the other two. Don't worry about the hazard type, of course, but we have a very large hodograph, and then we have strong cape values as well. And the GFS is the only model that has significant capping overnight, so that's going to be something to watch as well when we go into this. Now let's look at the other models synoptically. We'll first take a look at the UK Met, and then we'll go mesoscale with it. Again, very similar stuff to the GFS, just a little bit further south placement, which most of the other models are a bit further south than the GFS. So if I had to bet on an area, here's kind of what I would do right now. If I was gonna put out risk, I'd probably do like a 15% like this, and then like a 30% kind of like this. And yeah, I said 30%. I do like a 30% across Oklahoma and Texas, and into in the South Kansas as well. Looking at the UK Met, it just shows some really overpowered profiles, stuff like this. Really good wind shear there. Really good lapse rates, except the low levels. And then as we go into the overnight hours, the moisture goes further north, and we still have insane profiles over Oklahoma. Stuff like this. You also have stuff like this up in Kansas right here. Again, pretty good. Now let's go on to the Euro. It's going to have a very similar approach to this. The 12's a Euro just loaded in. And it's a bit better than the last couple of runs. We still have strong wind shear. We still have strong 850. Height anomalies just off the charts to the west. And we actually have some decent areas to watch, instability-wise, and some really nice soundings here. 60 knot deep layer shear with that, and then we have a really good sounding right here. We'll take a look at down in southern Texas there. Again, solid stuff down there as well. And we'll take a look at northern Texas here. Again, solid. Solid. So we're getting solid soundings across the board. Now, if we look at 6E, we'll take a look at 6E here. The instability gets a bit bigger, and the hodographs get not a bit, a lot bigger than what they were. We'll take a sounding kind of right where the sin isn't as bad. I don't know, the sin is bad. But we have a lot higher kind of lower level jet values overnight, which is typical, and the capping isn't so severe to where you'd probably still get some insane stuff at this point. Again, the Canadian model, let's take a look at it. Has some pretty insane hodographs at this point still. And enough instability, like a 2000 mixed layer cape is enough, and especially with that shear. So you go earlier into the afternoon here, we take a sounding kind of right there. Very, very nice wind profile there. Very nice, good instability as well. So we are pretty much locked in on a significant severe weather event on Tuesday with, I'm not going to say that yet, but definitely potential for a severe weather outbreak. Now, let's go on to Wednesday. The low starts to bomb out even more, and at this point, we probably would see some supercellular thunderstorms, but again, mainly, at this point now, it'd mainly be a linear event. But again, we still are going to have we're still going to have really good kinematics, and if we look at the 500 millibar trough, it's still going nuts. 850 is still going nuts. We'll actually look at 18Z, because that's when you're going to have the better instability. Take a sounding in northern Iowa there and just look at the amount of shear you're going to have with it, and yeah, there's no instability with that, thankfully, but the amount of shear there is just off really good. Now, western Iowa, on the other hand, has really good shear and enough instability to where you get severe weather. Now, looking at the Euro, Again, very similar story with the Euro. We're starting to get locked in that we're probably going to have a 15% type risk with this event right here. Probably for areas like maybe Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Nebraska. I'm looking at the GFS, it's more progressive. So we do have differences with this day, which probably will preclude an upgrade for now. But eventually, I do see there being a upgrade to a 15% if the models can all really start to agree, which most of them are agreeing pretty much, which is really interesting. The UK Meta also has a lot more moisture return than the other models as well. And it still has some really good photographs. We can look up towards 0Z, it has some really good moisture return up there in Iowa. It's some really good photographs. Now beyond that, the severe weather is probably not going to happen. So we're going to get a break, but that's going to do it.